When I was earning a bachelor's of music degree at Syracuse University, I remember getting up on Saturday mornings very early, having breakfast at the dining hall, and then heading to Byrd Library. I was usually one of the first people in the door. I would spend hours going through the stacks, looking at scores, listening to records. Yes, records. I am that brand of old. I was at the library on some Saturday mornings, hours before most college students even woke up. Why? It wasn't because I had an exam or a research project due. I just liked doing it. Sure, call me a music nerd, I can take it. But looking back on those moments, I'm grateful for the ways in which I cultivated my own curiosity. A couple episodes ago, my mentor, Dr. Everett McCorvey, said that after decades of teaching, he's still waiting to work his first day. He's curious about his students, about his work, about music and culture. And that curiosity can be a tremendous gift, especially when so much is asked of us as voice teachers. Hi, my name is David Sisco. My pronouns are he, him, and welcome to my podcast. I have a podcast, Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. This podcast is dedicated to the art and practice of teaching singers. It is an extension of my forthcoming book of the same title, which will be released by Routledge Press this summer, 2025. So today we're going to talk about, you guessed it, curiosity. My very special guest is speech-language pathologist Maurice Goodwin. More on him in just a moment. But first, let's find out a little bit more about curiosity. The Cambridge Dictionary defines curiosity as an eager wish to know or learn about something. Research tells us that there are two different kinds of curiosity, epistemic and perceptual. Epistemic curiosity is defined as the desire to acquire conceptual knowledge, and perceptual curiosity is the desire for sensory information. To date, most research has been focused on epistemic curiosity as it is a strong indicator of academic achievement and job performance. Curiosity impacts brain function. According to a 2014 research study, reward pathways in the brain are activated, particularly in the hippocampus and midbrain dopamine system, leading to enhanced learning, memory consolidation, and increased motivation to seek out new information when a person is feeling curious. Other studies have shown that there are both short and long-term benefits to engaging one's own curiosity, such as the potential for new information and expanded intellectual and creative capacities. Speaking of, curiosity has been directly linked to creativity through a 2019 research study. It can also promote resilience. A 2020 study notes that a curious person is more responsive to organizational changes. They are more intrigued than frustrated when trying to understand, appreciate, and extract the unique value of new colleagues and technologies, and flexible enough to adapt strategies and plans to unfamiliar cultures. All this being said, being curious requires us to admit that we don't know everything, which can be very challenging and vulnerable. In his study, The Power Game, Power Dynamics Between the Teacher and the Students in a Graduate Seminar, research Gahan Sidki explains that it is often the perceived or real pressures of an institution's expectations that may keep teachers and students from trying out new methods for fear of failure. So it's great to be curious. It can lead us to answers, creativity, and an ever-expanding island of knowledge. And yet, when considering the power dynamics often active in our own vocation, it can be tricky to navigate embracing curiosity and an ever-evolving understanding over the desire for certainty. With this information in hand, it is time to introduce you to our very special guest, Maurice Goodwin. Maurice is a licensed speech-language pathologist and a voice teacher based in Houston, Texas. He specializes in evaluating and treating singing and speaking voice disorders at the Texas Voice Center. Maurice serves as adjunct faculty at Lamar University, teaching courses on the singing voice and speech science. He is the owner of Goodwin Voice and Speech, a private practice, and co-founder of Voice Pro Ed, a continuing education company dedicated to advancing clinical skills in voice care. His work focuses on empowering professionals with the knowledge to effectively support clients with voice challenges. Maurice, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. I met you in Vienna at ICVT, and it was just one of those like you're my people moments, and I'm so grateful to continue to see the work you do in the world. And again, thanks for making time to do this. I'm really excited about our conversation to come.
Thank you. I love talking, so this works out well.
So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners a little bit of your personal history and how that shaped your desire to become an SLP and voice teacher.
Yeah, I received, like many folks, training in like private voice work as a singer. So
Mhm.
I have an undergraduate degree in vocal performance. Prior to that, I had grown up in the church singing, gospel music and performing and traveling and touring and writing music. That was a big, big part of my teenage years into my 20s and was a big part of my identity as that kind of work is. And then transitioning out of that into, classical music, which is what I studied in undergrad, I had gotten to the end of my graduate program and had this realization that maybe I don't want to be singing for the rest of my life. And at that point, I had no other vision of what it meant to be a singer than
Mm,
to go audition for, opera houses and do summer programs. And it wasn't interesting to me, that version of it. And I explored what other career paths I could use with the training and the knowledge and history that I had and was bringing to the table. So I went to Voice Foundation Conference, which many folks listening to this may also have attended in the past or have an interest in attending. And it's a collection of speech pathologists, laryngologists, voice teachers, voice pedagogy folks, voice science folks, and showed up bright-eyed and ready to find what was next. And speech pathology found me.
mm.
And it was only a few years later that I entered my training to become a speech pathologist at the University of Pittsburgh and got to work with some really wonderful folks there. And kind of the rest is my journey to where I am now. Some really great fellowship training. And um, ever since my training experience, have been pretty committed to training other folks and educating other people. And um, yeah, enjoying what I do has been really nice.
That's great. That's great. You have a very positive and I think helpful social media presence in the way that you engage with social media and in a very supportive way. I just really have enjoyed kind of um, taking in the content you put out with regards to the work that you do. It's great.
I appreciate it. I have really entered a stage of my life where I'm trying to approach things with a bit of humor more often than not. I feel like I was a very serious 20 something. I felt like I had to be serious to be taken seriously.
Mm.
And now I just desire to exist and have a bit more fun. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. So that's the fluff question. And now I have like a multi-pronged question that I know you can handle. So I'm guessing that at least some of the singers that you work with or that you come into contact with are coming to you at a moment of crisis, right? And they maybe want definitive answers about what's going on with their voice. I'm just wondering if it's challenging to stay in a growth mindset when you're in that position of power as a specialist, and how do you balance your knowledge and perhaps your desire to give them answers with your curiosity about what the client is experiencing? And then how do you engage the client to do the same? There's a lot in there, but we can take it piece by piece.
Perfect. Yeah, I was hoping you could help shape my answer. If you see any any avenues in there that feel worth exploring more, I'd be happy to
Sure.
kind of go into it. That relationship is always interesting. Um, I think as I've gotten more confident and competent as a speech pathologist in the knowledge required to do the work well, I have gotten significantly more comfortable not requiring myself to be the greatest like expert in the room. I really had to approach my work as a human first has been really helpful for meeting other humans. I can think back to the beginning of my practice. I really felt like I had to be something in the room.
Mm,
Um, and part of that probably came from my training, right? That
sure.
you have to know, and to know is to be helpful. And I
Right.
found that, especially with singers and performers, to probably to exist and not judge, um, and embrace the unknown, um, tends to probably be the key to the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah, that desire to, to show like I've got this, I've got it's such a can come from a really positive place, right?
Mhm.
But it can also create an energy in the room that creates a barrier too, right? So I'm aware too as a teacher, it's like how do I work at tearing down any possible barriers? In terms of knowledge, in terms of like whatever it is, and just to really, I love what you said, just to really approach it at the human level, because that's how we experience things.
What I always find unique about my role as a speech pathologist that works in voice and that has spent a lot of energy investing in the performance and singing voice aspect of voice health. A lot of us come from music training, and a lot of
Mm,
us come from a background of really traditional, like the master apprentice model of education.
yeah.
And then we do that in our clinical practice. And the medical model does that to people, right? It says, this is what's wrong with you. This is what needs to be fixed. And when I'm singing in front of clients, they're very aware of the fact that they are there with a diagnostic code, that, insurance says, yes, this is treatable and this is the treatment for it. Like there's all these structures that these singers and performers are functioning within that feel quite restrictive.
Mm,
Um, and for some people, there's a comfort in that. That's what's hard about it too. Um, we feel comfortable within structure, even if that structure isn't necessarily the best model or version of it, because curiosity is hard, because
yeah.
not knowing is hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we choose what we know.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you have to kind of read the room in terms of the client. Like you kind of have to
Yeah.
know, like, is this somebody that's gonna, even in a moment where, things are maybe not going the way that they want them to, that you're able to engage their curiosity. And then there are maybe other clients where you're like, I just gotta kind of keep this really clinical and keep it, obviously you're always being professional, but like,
Yeah.
but it's a different kind of lane maybe for some
Oh, for
people.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. And like there's so many variables to that too, right? There are some folks where it's like, oh, I have a performance on Friday. What am I supposed to do? And you're like, well, yeah, you're right. Now is not necessarily the time for like, let's sit in the what ifs. Like, let's get down to business. Like, I am going to like take all this knowledge that I've worked really hard for, and we're going to see how we can apply this. And then there are other situations where it's, I feel tied in this functional knot. I can't sing above an A4, after this really traumatic thing that happened to me. And we're like, let's sit in it. Like, I'm not here with tricks and tools. Like, this is so deeply a human thing. Let's get to work. I think what is unique about talking about this and, about exploring what this looks like in the studio space or the clinical space is often clinicians don't even know that there's another way of doing this work.
Hmm.
They don't even know that you don't have to approach things as you don't constantly have to be the expert in someone else. That doesn't have to be the way that your training model works. That doesn't have to be the way that your clinical model works. It just doesn't have to be. And so often folks don't know that there's another option. And so it's really helped me approach the work that I do with other clinicians and other educators and other teachers with a ton of compassion for them, because
Hmm.
I know what it feels like to feel like I have the weight of someone's career on my back, and that's not reasonable. It's not fair to me, and it's not reasonable for the singer or the person that I'm working with.
you wear a lot of different hats between kind of clinical work and work as an adjunct at Lamar University. And I'm just wondering if curiosity is considered a different value added in those spaces, and how do you maybe encounter resistance without feeling like you have to, I'm not asking for dirt, but like where might you encounter resistance um, when engaging people in curiosity in those
Yeah.
different spaces?
Yeah, I think from an academic standpoint, curiosity can be tough. There are some students who respond so beautifully to like an open prompt. A lot of the projects that I have some of my students engage in, I don't tell them how I want it back. Here is the idea, and here's what we're exploring, and respond at will. And that can be really, really tough for folks to engage in. I feel very comfortable as an instructor understanding my, prompt. Like if someone returns a thing with an open prompt, I understand that I may get something back that I wasn't expecting. Great, actually. Awesome.
Sure.
Let's work from there. So I feel really comfortable doing that. It can be tough for students, and I think it can be tough for university programs to imagine that things are different than how they are now. Um, and that is certainly also true in my like, clinical work, right? Why does it look this way? Why do sessions look this way? Why do we diagnose people this way? Why do we take this information in the way that we take it? And I think my curiosity leads me to just ask the question why. And if the process ends up staying the same as a result of the engagement in the question, that's fine. But I feel like maybe we haven't really asked why enough in a lot of different areas. Why does, undergraduate vocal performance training look the way that it does? Because we have enough data now to demonstrate that that's maybe not the best way of doing it. But we continue to engage in the process in that way because, well, that's what accreditation looks like, or that's how we got the program, the university to say yes to the program in the first place. I don't know that that's a strong enough reasoning. And we are all humans that like to engage with data, but this data is not leading us towards our own conclusion.
Mm, yeah. Have you had situations where you asked a why and got an answer, and then it just is it was a helpful answer and gave you context, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me, and I'm not needing to. It actually provides a context for me that's helpful. Um,
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm also deeply sometimes wrong. And I've become so comfortable
Same.
with I'm trying to find the sore spot and I'll poke something and then someone will be like, "Hey, we do that because of this reason." I'm like, "That is a great reason." You know what? I didn't have all that information. I get it now. And sometimes I still may not agree with it. And I'm
Sure.
like, I get it. That's fine. Sounds good. I also realize that like there are some people that just do things differently. And I see that with my clients, right? So not everyone who ends up in my like clinical office space is the right client for me. And I now, 8 years into my clinical practice, am way more comfortable with that for myself and even communicating that to the client
Hmm.
um, because I am such a curious person and because I feel really comfortable without as many boundaries. Not everyone does.
Yeah.
Some people really need tell me what to do and tell me how to do it and tell me how often to do it and tell me how long I need to do it for. And I just don't like working that way. And that's hard because then that means the person doesn't get what they need. And I feel like I'm working outside of my zone of genius too.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where I lean a lot on my colleagues who work similarly to them or feel comfortable giving them what they need.
It's interesting you say that because as you were talking, I think about like I think as voice teachers, it's a little bit more common for people to be like, that's actually not my area of specialty, or like, I think you're going to be so much better with this person, but I
Yeah.
don't. My perception is, and this may be my ignorance speaking, but my perception is that that's not something that maybe happens as often in clinical work.
I would agree. And I think it does come from that, like, oh, we're supposed to either know it all or we have such like limited clinical resources that if it's me, it's just me. And that can be tough. Those are
Mhm.
tough, things to navigate. At the same time, I just said I feel more comfortable now either recommending another therapist or adding additional resources. I've also had to recognize and growth in myself is seeing, you know what, this person needs this thing. And I have the tools to offer it. It may not be exactly the way that I want to, but again, this isn't about me. How do I offer and give them the thing that they need? Even if I would have approached it a little bit differently, that actually is part of this too, right? Is in this dance is seeing, oh, this person needs this thing. I have the tools to provide it in the way that they need it. Let me do that because it's not about me.
Right. Being client-centered or student-centered, as the case may be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but there's a cost to that in a way. I mean, you're in and out of different rooms, whether that be in your private practice or you have students coming in and out. And so the that requires us to constantly be pivoting, right? And constantly, again, reading the room
Mhm.
and staying curious about where this, okay, you're here today. Okay, great. Oh, there's resistance there. Okay, great. So I'm gonna morph a little bit more into you just want the facts, ma'am. Okay, great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
where I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be, right? That there's a cost to that. I think that I am also, I guess, being curious about is like is do we factor that in always as educators or clinicians? Because
Hmm.
I think that that's something that's um that I don't find we always talk about.
The
That makes
cost to the
sense?
clinician.
The cost of the clinician or the teacher. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the ability to be that facile,
Mm,
right? And when you're being bombarded with information and also other responsibilities outside of what's happening in this particular room, you know,
yeah. Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
Yeah. I will say, in my commitment to honesty, I find it exhausting sometimes. I find it
Sure.
exhausting a lot of the time. Um, in a way that I find it shocking that my favorite part about my job is still the people part of it. And it's the thing that keeps me, you know, a clinician first. And I would describe myself that probably for the rest of my career. It's what fuels me. And it probably at this point in my career is one of the most tiring parts. Um, yeah, it's interesting because it's just a different form of it's curiosity in a different way, right? I have to stay curious for everyone. I don't have the option because everyone is so very different.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and kind of coming up with my toolbox is a garage size at this point, and I'm just kind of having to dig for different things all day.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I've been talking about in this episode is that curiosity is can be a real gift too
Mm.
in terms of inspiring creativity and giving us kind of psychic energy to kind of
Yeah.
get through the day.
One of my favorite things that I tell every client that I work with uh, in our first session, because most people don't know what to expect from something like voice therapy. And even when I'm working with singers who are seeing me outside of the clinic, so if I'm working one-on-one privately with a singer who's maybe on tour or preparing for something, um, I tell folks all the time, I just have a bunch of tools and we're just going to kind of see how you respond to them. And none of them are right and none of them are wrong. And some of them you might like and some of them you might not. And that's okay too. And that alone is a freeing statement. But it, again, for people who aren't used to having a say or used to um, verbalizing consent in terms of like what they like and what they don't like and what they do and what they don't want to do, that can be challenging. I mean, there's so many singers out there that are told what to do with their voice, not asked what feels good for them or asked to reflect on an exercise that they prefer. They're just told do this because it will give you this outcome. And that's just so deeply not how I like working.
I'm wondering what your perception is about today's students and today's young people, I mean, you're to me,
I'll take it.
you're established, but like you're younger than I am. So like, but but for folks who maybe are younger than you that you engage with, how do you see them engaging with their curiosity, and is it maybe different from how you do?
Hmm.
As you're thinking about that, I'll share that I find, and this is, of course, this is not all across the board, but I find more of my students less resilient and more desiring of give me the answer so I can do the thing, and then it's like I can check the box and it's done. It doesn't mean that they're not wanting to work hard. They're very hardworking, but that there's a desire to get it right. Um, and I think my perception is, as someone who grew up without having this in my hand, part of it is, this kind of process versus product and being able to produce something quickly and our ability to do that on a regular basis impacts their level of curiosity,
Hmm.
perhaps, in some situations. I'm just wondering if anything that jives with anything that you experience.
I feel like I've had, two versions of Gen Z that I've worked with sometimes, and even millennials. It's some folks feel completely released and like freed from that. And that for me was a big like learning curve, especially coming from a model that said there was a right way to do this. There's a right way to have a session. There's a right way to get someone to the end goal. And having a client that doesn't live by those rules kind of like rocks you.
Yeah,
Um, and it's freeing. It changed. I think of clients who change the way that I do things because they just did not desire to do them the way that I wanted to, which is great. And then for sure, I think there's a lot of pressure on folks to produce a product, singers for sure, And I think what is challenging about the work that I do when we're working in the context of like functional challenges or like voice disorder, like a tissue issue or anything like that, is it's hard to produce without guaranteeing a product.
Hmm,
And so they want to know that at the end of all this work, they're going to be able to do what they did again or sound like XYZ performer. But they are, 2 months out of a, post-op for a vocal fold polyp, and they have a pretty significant amount of vocal fold scar or stiffness. And I don't know that they will, period.
sure.
And that is really, really challenging, I think, but for anyone, but especially for young people who I agree are extremely hard workers. I don't have this perception of young people that they don't like work hard or they don't know what they want. I
Oh,
think
totally.
the opposite is true. There's a lot going on in terms of wanting to quote unquote make it or produce a certain thing. Um, yeah, that's hard.
So in an IG reel a while back, you had mentioned that your focus as an SLP is perhaps niche compared to the panoply of options that one could explore as an SLP. And I'm wondering if there are certain subjects that are kind of sparking your curiosity um, as someone who's just continuing to grow in their work.
Yeah, I think as a speech pathologist, especially someone who's so niched, I'm interested in like the brain and how the brain works. And, as we continue to learn just more about motor learning and how the action of learning itself, what that means. And I think all of that is very interesting. And I think there are some other areas of our field that engage in that maybe a little bit better.
Mhm.
As voice clinicians, we like to think everything is the result of like tissue and muscles, and that's it. And A plus B equals C. And if there's a problem with B, we can just use D. But that's not really always true. And I see a lot of neurologic things in clinic that make absolutely no sense. And so I'm hoping in my career we continue to learn more. Um, and I will say, that I learned more about being a voice clinician from doing like pediatric speech and language than I did anything else in terms of like learning how to shape exercises and being on your toes. Like children break the rules of how the world is supposed to work, right?
Hmm.
And you just learn how to work with it. And so I learned how to be a clinician from working with, a 2 and a 3 year old laying on the floor, playing with Legos, and cars. That's how you learn how to be a clinician. And so I felt like I was able to bring a lot of those principles of, this pediatric speech and language where it's semi-structured and it's really play-based into my work as a voice clinician, which is also semi-structured and play-based.
Yeah, that's great. Play is such a huge part. I think it has to be such a huge part of what
Yeah,
we do.
yeah, yeah.
Again, both for psychic, energy to get through the day, but also, you know, what that does to the client, when they can engage in that as well.
Yeah, I don't know that I grew up as a musician having a lot of play-based learning. I definitely did not. I grew up in choirs. I grew up in bands. I grew up in a system that trained me to sing for juries. And then when I got a role, it was to sing the role. But I don't know that I ever really had the opportunity to study as a singer for the purpose of just doing it until I was an adult. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that I got to be a curious singer ever.
Honestly, I'm turning 50 in a month and I'm just now like having fun. Like,
Isn't that
figuring
wild?
out like singing and like and just like I'm because I'm starting to put together a new show, just a something to do and yeah, just really getting to have fun and explore and play
Mhm.
with different music and see how it lights me up or doesn't, right?
It's just a theme at all. So often where I think we see singers running into difficulty when it comes to like disorder or like really like big functional hills is this lack of curiosity and play in their own body. And so they're forcing their body to produce a sound that someone else's body does. And we're running into challenges, or they're forcing their body and their voice to do a role in the way that someone else does, at the intensity that someone else does. And so often my work with a singer is like, what if that wasn't real? What if you just played around and the thing that you produced is good and it's different? Cool. Awesome. Let's do that. Let's do that thing. And that really breaks the mold of what we've been told training is supposed to be.
Could not agree more. I see that all the time in musical theater. It's this I have to be this is my type. I'm like, no, nope,
Please,
that's
please
dead.
no.
That
Please
is
no.
dead. Like because, that whole system has kept countless singers from being seen. So no, sorry, we're gonna figure out what your essence is as an individual.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna listen to the cast album recording, at least not right away while you're learning it. You're going to find your own voice within it. And then great, you can listen to Ben Platt, and and whoever, and see what they did with it. But you're going to come at it with your point of view first, right?
Yeah. I think it's hard. I think it's very hard. It's hard for people to do. It's hard to validation of that process is tough from a teacher and a student standpoint. I don't know that
Yeah.
we're validated enough in the like, what if there is no end goal, please, please? What if we don't have to check a box at the end of this?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I knew this could be a good conversation.
Uh, just like culturally relevant, like one of the things that I loved and that I feel it's interesting because you think of movie adaptions, right? Wicked and the Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande of it all. Of course, there's maybe a timbre, a tone, a range, a quality that fits the role naturally. It brings you to that role and that person. It inspires the idea of an Elphaba or a Glinda, but just the fresh take on it and the sounds and the colors and the contours feels fun. It feels
Yeah.
fun. in a way that I'm like, I would love to hear maybe another voice do this too. What if it
Absolutely.
was a different vowel shape than, we all get on Facebook and be concerned about? Just who cares? Have fun. Let's, yeah, yeah, this is fun. This was fun. It tickles my ears in all the ways that I, love being a musician.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Make sure you
I
feel
keep
okay.
telling myself that like one day I will be able to talk about this side of the work in a more concrete way. But I feel like life is bringing me to a place where I'm like, again, why does it have to be this way?
Mm,
And I found so much personal and professional freedom in keeping that in the back of my head and breaking the rules while like staying, as you had mentioned, professional, for the purpose of helping people because I am a much more free person than I was, and desire that for everyone that I interact with. In the way that, Anna Deemer and I started Voice Pro Ed, like a continuing education company. And so much of, I think, our own approach has been curiosity, even within the structure of building a business and thinking about how it happens and the business of business. We have so deeply desired to exemplify with our learners what we want to see in our lives, with each other, what we want to see in our lives. And it's really built something that is first beautiful and fruitful for us, and then just so happened to also work. And it's just affirming to me that things can be different. And all we have to do is continue to create the difference.
I'm a huge fan of the podcast Radio Lab. I was recently listening to it, and one of the producers explained that her reporting for an episode was like earning a bunch of mini master's degrees in different subjects. God, that sounds like heaven to me. There is so much more I want to know. And my hope is twofold. First, that I never lose that desire to stretch myself and my curiosity in every possible direction, and that I can inspire my students to do the same. And by the way, just to say this out loud, I didn't start this podcast because I think I know everything. On the contrary, I started it because I want to talk to people who know more than I do. So, how do you cultivate your curiosity? What are you currently curious about and wanting to research or experience? And in what ways do you inspire your students to engage with their own curiosity? Sound off. You can email me at wholeheartedvoicepedagogy@gmail.com or find me on the socials. My handle on most platforms is at Sisco Songs or at Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. And if you've made it this far, why not subscribe to the podcast? I am learning so much by talking to my amazing guests, and I would love to share that with you. More soon. Take care of you.